A veteran of Israel's security establishment and of the Israeli right says Israel is engaged in ethnic cleansing in Gaza. There's renewed talk of a hostage deal. We'll speak to the mother of one of those still held captive. And we have some big news about this podcast. It's Unholy. I'm Jonathan Friedland of The Guardian in London.
And I'm Yonit Levy of Channel 12 in Tel Aviv. It's Unholy, two Jews on the news. We're not usually this self-involved, but you did say, Jonathan, that we have some big news this week?
We are, because we are very excited to announce the launch of the Unholy community on Patreon. It's a chance for those of you who've been listening to us for months, or even in some cases the whole 4 years since we started doing this. It'll be 4 years next month. A chance for you to connect with us and get even more out of Unholy. Nothing is going to change in terms of how you get Unholy. We'll still be dropping an episode every Friday wherever you get your podcast. That continues as before. But now we're inviting you to become a member of the Unholy community. There's different tiers for how you would want to do that, whether you want to be a friend of the pod or part of the Unholy family. All the details are going to be in the show notes about what you'd get and what that entails. Also on patreon.com/unholypod, you can see all about that, about the bonus episodes you'll get, the early access to events. And I think I'm quite excited about this one. Why don't you tell them about the quarterly Zoom call, Yoni?
That we're going to have a Zoom call with both of us every 3 months for whoever chooses to be a family member, the top tier of our membership on Unholy, and also a tote bag you can see behind me if you're watching this on YouTube. So there's a lot of extra stuff. And as you said, we're continuing as we were before, but this is some extra stuff for anyone who would want to be part of our community. We had some sort of discussion, what is supposed to be the hierarchy here between family and friends. This started a pretty interesting debate between us that I think we should have recorded, but these are the two separate groups, either friend or family.
The whole friend and family thing, by the way, is such a Jewish thing. I have to mention this. I was at an engagement party at the weekend for beloved friends of ours, Mark and Selena, celebrating the engagement of their daughter Jess to Ollie. Mark makes a brilliant speech, and he gives the speech and he said, we're all around us. Here are our friends. These are the people we love. Everyone else is family, which got a fantastic laugh in the room. But I thought it's just fantastic, this distinction between friends and family. I'm sure there are, hours of Talmudic seminars we could have on that subject. But we've decided that's the language we're going to use. The serious point I would make is, and I mentioned it a couple of times, I think, in the past, listeners have been amazing in their response, your response to what we do on the podcast. Many of you have come up to either Yonit or me and said that somehow you found the podcast to be a lifeline, particularly in the months since October 7th of 2023. And so this is a chance for, you to step up that involvement and support what we're doing. And as we've been saying, also to get more from us. So we hope you'll take us up on that, whether as friend or family, and all the details, as we've said, in the show notes. We'll give them again at the end of the episode and on patreon.com/unholypod.
And we should also say that we have a special holiday promotion for whoever wants to sign up now to be a family member. And also you can give this as a gift. If only there was a Jewish holiday fast approaching. I can think of one. So I thought I'd mention that as well.
Oh,
because you were getting serious,
idea.
So I wanted to get serious too.
It is such a good idea because, of course, Hanukkah is approaching. This is the gift that will keep on giving to the Unholy listener in your life. People have also noted it is Chrismukkah this year. We will talk about that when it's getting nearer. But the first night of Hanukkah is also the first day of a rival festival whose name briefly escapes me. If people do gift giving at this time of year, one way or another, I think we may just have solved a lot of people's gift idea problems with that suggestion. A subscription, a membership, friend or family to Unholy, I think might go down rather well.
So, some news that doesn't have anything to do with us? maybe?
Yes, there is lots of that going on. Look, we mentioned the top. This, to me, explosive interview, which came at the sort of start of the week from Moshe Ya'alon, Bogi Ya'alon, former chief of staff, former defense minister to Benjamin Netanyahu, and crucially, I think, from the Likud. That's the bit of the Israeli political spectrum he comes from. And he gave an interview, which he then was interviewed about on your network, on Channel 12, saying that Israel, the IDF, was engaged in ethnic cleansing. Now, obviously, this phrase is huge in its sort of resonance and strikes horror into many people who hear it. So it was very, very significant that he should be saying these words. And in the Channel 12 interview, I think he was at some pains to clarify, and I think we should as well. Some people hear that phrase and think that means, mass murder in order to clear out a population determined by their ethnicity. He clarified he wasn't saying that. What he was talking about instead was an area being cleared out, people being moved from their homes and evacuated, and that he was talking about. And he didn't back off from that. And he did say, I thought this was important, it's already happening, he said, in Gaza. And then there was some discussion about who he exactly blamed for that and whether this was an accusation as if suggesting the IDF is deliberately doing this, or is it really being used? And I think that's what I took from what his meaning was, that he's, the IDF itself, the military, are following orders to clear an area as if for operational purposes, but behind that are politicians, and he named them, figures of the far right, Bezalel Smotrich, Itamar Ben-Gvir, Daniela Weiss, a long-time settler leader, and so on, who have this other agenda, which is to clear an area and make sure no one ever comes back. And that, he said, meets the definition of ethnic cleansing as he defined it. So it's a very significant intervention. I don't think he did it lightly, and he said he was doing it in order to sound the alarm because he thinks this is a grave development.
So I think we should start basically with what he said originally. This was in an interview to Democrat TV. It's a liberal internet channel. He said to journalist Lucia Arish, she says, "I support separation. That means not walking on the path that we are dragged on right now, the road of occupation, annexation, and ethnic cleansing, if you look at the northern part of Gaza." And then she asks him again, "Are you sure? I mean, I'm hearing what you said, ethnic cleansing." And he says, we're on the road to there. And he said, "We're not on the road to there. Like, that is happening now, essentially." Now, as you said, this created a huge uproar in Israel. It made huge headlines inside Israel and outside Israel. This is not one of these stories that gets headlines only outside of the country. And then he gave this interview to Channel 12. Before talking more about what he said in that interview, we should again say and stress, not only former IDF chief of staff and former minister of defense, also, as you said, originally coming from the Israeli right. This is a man that in 2009 said that the Peace Now movement is a virus, right? So that is an essential part. Of course, he moved a little bit to the center, and in Israeli politics today, when there's no right and left, actually, but just the pro-Bibi and anti-Bibi, he is very clearly in the anti-Bibi camp and has been for a very long time. He was part of the Blue and White Party with Benny Gantz and Yair Lapid. Now, you stated correctly that what he wanted to say in that interview for Channel 12 when he was trying to clarify his remarks, or rather actually doubling down on parts of it, was two things. First of all, that he meant the evacuation of the population and not something else. And he said, and I think that is the most important part of what he was trying to say, is basically the IDF thinks that it is doing it for operational reasons. And by the way, Jonathan, if you talk to any general in the IDF these days, they will say this to you as clear as day. We are evacuating the population to protect them. The minute we clear that area from Hamas, we will bring the population back. But he says the danger, Alon is saying the danger is the right-wing politicians who actually want to settle that area with Jewish settlers. And that is, he says, ethnic cleansing. Now,
there's the thing that complicated a little bit was there was an Israeli IDF officer who did tell reporters these people are not coming back to their homes.
I actually, if I remember correctly, that was an off-the-record conversation that then became on record because some journalists thought it should be. I don't I never met one of those people who say that. And I spoke to many generals off the record who say exactly what I said, which is we plan to bring them back. So whatever that quote is, I can't answer for that conversation. But I will say that, you and I'll speak for myself. I have a person that I always turn to when there's things, when I need the moral clarity of what is actually going on. You don't need to guess who that person is. That's Amos Harel, who spoke in Hebrew. By the way, before I get to what Amos said, I'll just say that we tried to get Bogi to get Moshe Yaalon on the podcast, and what he told me was essentially he wants to speak in Hebrew for the Israeli audience. That is what it is important for him to do. He wants to sound the alarm. That's why he's talking with these harsh words, and not to speak to the international audience. I would say I think that's a mistake, because what he said obviously created such an uproar that I think that if he had explained parts of it, I think that would be extremely helpful. But anyway, in any case, Amos, who spoke this week on the Haaretz podcast in Hebrew, said this, and again, I think it's important, is he said, I don't think this is happening in practice. There are harsh acts perhaps being committed. Some of them do not meet the moral values of the IDF. The government is indifferent, and there are more ministers and former officers who are playing a dangerous flirtation with the idea of war crimes. But I do not, this is Amos Harel, I do not see a deliberate plan ordained from above and executed from below for the systematic ethnic cleansing of northern Gaza. Now, obviously, this is Yaalon's attempt at making the Israeli society look at what is happening and not follow the far-right ministers into a situation which they declared very clearly that they want, and that is to evacuate the population and resettle the area with Jewish settlers. To me, one of the more interesting things this week was to see how these same far-right ministers are appalled at Moshe Yaalon's comments when they themselves have said, horrible things. You just need to look up, what Ben Gvir and what Smotrich have been saying about the population in Gaza. And just to be so appalled by what he is saying when there are actually people in government saying the same things and landing Israel in the ICJ in The Hague.
Yeah, he actually cited in his interview with Channel 12, he cited that the remark of Bezalel Smotrich saying he had no problem starving 2 million Palestinians to death. He cited that as an example of the kinds of things that are being said. I think he was, look, it's an interesting thing, this phrase. It's a terrible phrase. It's a dread phrase, rather, ethnic cleansing. The interviewer from your network put to him that people will think about the 1940s or 1930s in Germany. That was how the interviewer put it. I actually think the phrase originated, the first time it started coming into use, I think, was in the Balkan Wars in the 1990s. And I think that's what he has in his mind, because he says, look, I'm not talking about mass murder as a means of diluting the population. I'm not saying that. I'm rather talking about a different definition, evacuating a population from its homes, destroying their homes. That's what's happening in Bet Hanun and Bet Lahia. Obviously, you cited Amos, who we both, revere on these matters, his perspective. But I think Yaalon, is somebody who comes with great credibility on these issues. And that is what he's seeing. And I think his message partly was to his successors in the military brass. At one point he says, pay attention, listen to what's going on, what these politicians in the political echelon are saying, where you might think you're doing this operational thing. And this is, I think, how we square the two accounts. What you were saying a moment ago about what IDF officers say and what he is seeing. He's saying, you may think that that's what you're doing, and that may be indeed in good faith what you're doing, but these other people have this agenda and they will use you for their agenda. And I think that's how we might square these two descriptions. And the fact that, and again, we've talked about it on the podcast, but there are photographs people can see of Daniela Weiss and the others, all, absolutely sort of licking their lips on the edge, on the Gaza envelope, waiting to get in there. They cannot wait. They've already put up their maps of future Garinim, nuclei of future settlements that they plan for in Gaza. And I think that's, again, something that Yaalon talked about, that they are already doing this and this is underway. So I think his point is that the effect of this, the purpose of it behind those giving the orders, the politicians, is one that he would say would meet that kind of 1990s definition of ethnic cleansing.
Yeah, and I think you're right about the way that he targeted these politicians and said to the military, notice what they're trying to do. I think that the problem with this term, which is, as he said, I use this term because I wanted to sound the alarm, is when anyone who needs to have any fodder to attack Israel with, he just gave it to them. And again, I'm sad by the fact that he wouldn't also speak in English and explain a lot of it, because I think the interview he gave after the interview we're quoting from Channel 12 did in fact clarify what he was trying to say. But it's becoming more and more clear that at least parts of the far right government are taking this in one direction, and the military wants to take it in a different direction. That will somehow have to reach a conclusion. And I don't know if that conclusion is, Trump pounding his fist on the table and saying, end the war. But I just want to stress one more thing. Most of the Israeli public wants the hostages back, wants to be assured and reassured that the Gaza envelope is protected, and doesn't want Jewish settlements in the northern part of Gaza. I think that should also be said.
Yeah, that's important. Your colleague put to him this notion of how the words will be used around the world, and showed him headlines in the Arab papers and so on, as if,
and in the Hamas's telegram using this, and in Al Jazeera using this. Obviously, everyone picking this up.
Very much. And he said, I can't be responsible for how people use these words. This is, I think, a genuine dilemma, this, because if you do speak out, of course, you're going to be providing material for those who we might say don't need more material, but they're not short of it. But it gives them that ammunition. On the other hand, as he said, he thinks he needs to sound the alarm for his own citizens. I think it's always a dilemma. But when people say, "Oh, you've now helped, Israel's critics," I don't think the address for that complaint is Moshe Ya'alon. I think the address for that complaint is the actions themselves that he is identifying, whether that's the political branch or whatever. I think, it's such a cliche, but it is a classic blame the messenger technique. He's the one warning off the fire. You don't blame him, you blame the arsonist. And I think that's all, that's perennial with this subject. There's always going to be that difficulty, but if there comes a point where he's clearly a patriot, this person who has, worn the country's uniform at the highest level, he's trying to do his bit to avert what he sees as an ongoing disaster.
Meanwhile, while all this discussion is going on, Hamas is still holding 100 hostages. I can also assure you that most of the Israelis would say the war can end tomorrow if the hostages are released and come back home. The president-elect of the United States, Donald Trump, said there will be hell to pay if the hostages aren't released before he is sworn in on January 20th. This is very much quintessential Trump, but there is a feeling in the sort of defense echelon in Israel, and I think among many Israelis, that perhaps this is an opportunity for things to change, to somehow move forward. Halavai, I wish. In the meantime, there hasn't been a lot of good news. The IDF officially telling 6 Israeli families who lost their loved ones in Gaza that they were murdered by their captors during an Israeli air raid. This is Yoram Metzger and Alex Danzig and Chaim Perry, Nadav Popelwell, Avraham Munder, and Yegev Buchstav. These are all people that we knew, sadly, were dead, but the circumstances were not clear. Now they are clearer. They were also murdered by their captors. It is very clear. We should also mention Itai Svilsky, one of the hostages. His body was recovered this week. It's very clear that as time goes by, more and more people are saying very clearly in the military and in every other place in Israel, the more you wait, the less chances there are to retrieve these people alive. One of them was indeed filmed by Hamas and is alive. We know that for sure. Yael Alexander, who is an American and an Israeli. He's 20 years old. In fact, he will be 21 soon, December 29th. He was a combat soldier for Golani. I think it's very interesting. We'll talk with his mother in a moment, but I think it's very interesting that Hamas, for the first time, filmed and published this video of a soldier and of an American soldier, that American Israeli. There's a message here for two nations. One is to the Israelis saying, you're talking about this deal only on humanitarian grounds and women who will be released, but there is a whole a group of soldiers that need to come out, and that's the bigger deal that you should be discussing. And of course, to the Americans signaling and putting pressure and saying there are still American Israeli hostages being held. Sadly, we have also learned this week that another similar story, like Yael Alexander, Omer Neutra, who's also an Israeli. His parents lived in the United States. He came back to enlist as a lone soldier, and he was considered abducted. He was, in fact, abducted, but he was murdered on October 7th, and his body is held in Gaza.
And in fact, the story of Yael Alexander and Omer Neutra, they're similar stories of the Israeli families from the living in the United States, and the son deciding to sign up in effect voluntarily because it would be very easy to avoid military service, but instead doing that. So the biographies are similar, and we, as you mentioned, will be talking with Edan Alexander's mother, Yael, about this development and the sort of mixture of feelings in seeing, obviously, the huge relief of seeing her son alive, and then it's a video that's released for propaganda purposes and in some ways to inflict more psychological torment on an Israeli public. You mentioned Donald Trump and that remark of his, "They'll be hell to pay." It's a difficult comment to interpret coming from him, because we know that he's all about ending wars and ending military involvement abroad. And you think, what does it mean when Donald Trump makes a threat like that, given that we know he doesn't want to use American force and is the last person who does want to, bring hell down? In a way, he benefits from the fact that he is seen as so unpredictable and mercurial that even though all his policy signals are against military engagement, he can make a threat like that and people think, you know what, he's just crazy enough, he might do it. And so that's why it's quite useful for him, but there used to be the madman theory of nuclear deterrence applied to Richard Nixon. Kissinger would go around saying he's mad, and I can't promise you that he won't do something crazy. And Donald Trump has that sort of built in. It's actually an asset, strangely, when it comes to this sort of thing. We should mention that there is reporting that Israel has given Hamas an updated proposal for a new deal. Hard to tell how much has changed from the proposal that was talked about in August and failed to materialize. That's also in the mix of these developments. And again, I think we would just want to clock it because we did talk about Donald Trump's appointments, some of them already looking as if they may run into the ground. His choice of Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, not many people are convinced that one is going to go through, given developments this week. But Donald Trump has given an advisory role to Massad Boulos, who is a word exists in this language, in Hebrew and in Yiddish, but not in English for this, which is your child's in-laws. So he is the machaton of Donald Trump. He is the father-in-law of Tiffany Trump.
Not the first time our listeners of this podcast hear this name, right? We've mentioned him a few times in the run-up to the election.
Trump used him on the campaign trail to send a message to reassure Arab American voters. A lot of Arab American voters, incidentally, very disappointed. They felt as if they were getting these messages from Massad Boulos and the Trump campaign saying they were going to be very different from Kamala Harris and Joe Biden on Israel. And then he appoints all these massively, pro-Israeli right-wing voices, Mike Huckabee and so on. Massad Boulos is there to advise in general, but particularly on sort of Arab American affairs. I wouldn't hold your breath for thinking this guy is going to be hugely influential. I think in a way it's signaling and it deals with a constituency. I'm not sure that, Middle East policy is going to be set by Massad Boulos. I wouldn't expect that, but it's just a little bit of positioning on the chessboard by Donald Trump.
Yeah, and another thing we should mention this week, it's a strange world we live in where the headlines are so dramatic that even something like, the rebels take Aleppo is something that we get to after like 30 minutes of our conversation. But we should mention this development in the comeback of the Syrian civil war and the surprise to Bashar al-Assad, just in the sense that I would say two things about this briefly. One, it shows that the fact that Hezbollah and Iran are weaker than they were before, the fact that they agreed to this deal with Israel that entails, first of all, American involvement in Lebanon, and of course the detachment of the two arenas of Gaza and the north. Everyone sees this weakness. And that weakness also sort of resonates on Bashar Assad himself, who's part of that group with Hezbollah, the axis of evil with Hezbollah in Iran. For Israel, it is a kind of a worrying development. This is really the epitome of better the devil you know, and Bashar Assad definitely fits that bill. And what would happen if these sort of rebels try and, infiltrate Israel in the Golan Heights? What if they take over Syria? What if they take over Jordan? All kinds of questions that were sort of running around the Israeli psyche this week because we don't have enough to worry about. So just to mention that also happened this week. I think we should probably, just mention that as well.
Yeah, I mean, Tom Friedman was on our podcast a couple of weeks back and said there that Iran has suffered the equivalent of the 1967 war, the Six-Day War style defeat. What did he mean by that? That its proxies that had encircled Israel in a kind of ring of fire, one by one, they had suffered a series of huge setbacks, most demonstrably Hezbollah in Lebanon, but also Iran itself, where it had been directly attacked by Israel, and that these series of setbacks had weakened it. So, how does Israel eat to Syria? Assad was able to make war and slaughter of his own people because he had two big backers in the form of Iran and Russia. And both of them are either distracted with Russia tied up with Ukraine and having to bring in reinforcements from North Korea. They don't have the bandwidth to be also helping Assad. And Iran, its patron, Assad's patron. Both of those are either weakened or overstretched, or in a way a bit of both. And so suddenly Assad's regime is more vulnerable.
Right, and remember how involved Nasrallah was in helping Assad murder his own people, and he's gone as well. So,
He was at his right hand in doing that. One reason, again, among many, why Nasrallah was not wholly mourned in the Middle East for the culpability he has for Assad's slaughter of the Syrian people. So the point is that those people notice that. And so these militants, Islamist militants, who see that the regime is weaker and made their push for Aleppo. But as you say, Israel has sort of, mixed feelings about that, because I remember Netanyahu on a visit to London quite early on in the Syrian civil war. I was one of a group of reporters talking to him about that, saying, surely this is an encouraging development. Assad is an enemy regime and it looks like there could be change. This was like in the Arab Spring period. And his ambivalence, to put it very gently, was so visible, you realized, he actually much prefers Assad there to any other of the available alternatives. And so it's panned out to be in the decade that has followed. But as we said, this week we want to hear from somebody who feels and watches these events very, very intimately. These are personal for her and her family in a very, very direct way.
Yael Alexander is the mother of Edan Alexander, who was abducted on October 7th from the Israel-Gaza border. He's an Israeli-American, serves as a combat soldier in the Golani Brigade. On Saturday, Hamas released a video of Edan, which was the first sign of life since the hostage deal in November 2023, when released hostages said they were with him. Yael, thank you so much for talking to us today. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much for having me.
Can you firstly kind of share with us your first reaction to seeing that video? I mean, the gut-wrenching feeling that everyone had watching it, even if they weren't connected to Edan. Can you tell us what went through your head and your heart?
So let's start with that I came to Israel on Thanksgiving weekend. I had a feeling that I don't know, I want to be next to Edan. This is his favorite holiday. I asked my husband, it's not a permission, but I asked him if it's going to be okay with him to go to the dinner with all our friends, with Mika and Roy, and I will spend the time with the family. So I came to Israel on Wednesday morning. I thought I will have a small meeting, some media, nothing major. And then Saturday, 1 p.m., my officer that with us, with the family, he's giving us all the updates about Edan, about the situation. He just told me that there is a promo. They cannot see a face, but still they can assess that it's Edan. And he told me if I'm in the house, if I can see it, my heart start pounding. I came back home. I've been at my sister's house, and then I asked her to watch the promo couple of times and tell me if it's scary or not, because listen, it's 421 days. I didn't hear Edan, so it was very difficult to me to handle it. It was too much. And then I saw the promo. It was very scary promo. I saw Edan leaning towards his knees and looked like he's crying, but I cannot see his face, but I see his hand. I see his ear, neck. Immediately I said to my officer, okay, this is Edan, definitely, this is Edan. And then I asked them, okay, what now? He told me we need to wait, maybe a video will pop. So we need to wait patiently. 4 hours later, they sent me a video that I seeing my beautiful boy sitting in the dark, begging for his life. It was very difficult text. It was so hard to see, I'm watching it and I'm crying and I'm shaking, and all the time I'm saying, this is Edan, this is Edan. I cannot believe, this is what I hope for so many days, just to hear his voice again, to see him, to see his face. Suddenly I saw that he's got some beard, this is something that he didn't have, just to see your son. After I saw the video once, I saw it twice, I saw it for the third time, and then I decided that I'm gonna have the strength, because he told us when he approached the family that please be strong. Mom, Dad, Mika, Roy, please be strong. This nightmare is gonna end. And he gave me strength. And I went to Hostage Plaza in Tel Aviv and I gave the speech, and I also released the video. I said to everyone, it's okay. I want everyone to see the hostages are still alive and they are still waiting to release from this hell.
Before this video was released, as I understand it, the last sign of life that anybody had was from a year ago, from November. What did you know before this video appeared?
Before the video, we didn't have an actual sign of life. The intelligence wasn't so still. The intelligence, it's tough. But I knew in my heart and from the inside that if Edan was so strong on October 7 and afterwards when they saw him in the tunnels late November, I had this hope, and I'm still keeping it, that everything will be okay. We will reunite again, But no one told me, listen, definitely, we have a sign of life, we saw Edan, or nothing, because no one really since then.
There were some hostages coming back who told you, I believe, told you about him helping other hostages, about translating for hostages. I mean, you did hear, I assume, some of pieces of life from your son from the tunnels.
You know what? When they told me about Edan inside the tunnels, I immediately knew, okay, this is my son, He found the strength to comfort people, to tell them, it's okay, you all civilians, you will release really soon. He spoke with teenagers, he spoke with older ladies, he tried to speak for the Thais worker, to tell the Hamas that they are not Israeli civilians, that they're not supposed to be there. I heard amazing stories about my 19-year-old son that I was crying every time that I saw a hostage that released and told me, oh my God, I've been with your son. I gave him a hug. You hearing these stories, and it's very, very emotional. You feel the connection immediately to these people, and till today I'm in touch with them. After the video release of Edan, I got a text from one of the hostages that been with Edan inside, She immediately sent me hugs and love.
You mentioned before that what you'd said at the hostage square, hostage plaza, was that you wanted people to see this video. And I know some people feel uncertain with these videos because, yes, it's proof of life, and obviously that's a wonderful thing. On the other hand, it's Hamas propaganda, these videos. They've made them. What should people think about this? Do you want people hearing you now to go look online and watch this video? What's your advice to them?
We are in crucial moments, and suddenly this video pops, and Edan is speaking to the whole country of Israel, is speaking directly to Benjamin Netanyahu, is approaching President-elect Trump, and also there is the moment that is approaching us, the family, and you're seeing the pain in his eyes, and he's crying, and this is a genuine emotion, and you see this kid is suffering and he's begging for his life. And after I spoke with the intelligence officers, they told me, Yael, it's okay, you can release this video, it's not gonna affect, it's not gonna do something bad, or it's good. Everyone in Israel and in the world supposed to see it, supposed to hear the screaming of the hostages. Edan done it for everyone. And they need to understand the people are still alive and they're still waiting to be released to their families.
Are you surprised at all, Yael, that there are parts of Israeli society that think that this, that war should continue, that obviously the price is the fact that the hostages aren't coming back? There are all kinds of problems. Of course, Hamas is first and foremost to blame for all this. But are you surprised that there are not more people, for example, at the hostages plaza in Tel Aviv?
Now I know that 74% of the people in Israel are they supporting the deal. They supporting the release of the hostages. Israel now in a strong position after they execute the ceasefire in the northern border with Hezbollah. They feel like they in power. They feel they Hamas by themselves now. No one is coming to do some act against Israel, also Iran. So now I think it's time, It's time to get this done. It's too long, but they still alive. And we have this sign of proof of Edan, thank God. And they need to release him and all the 100 hostages.
And what about, like Yonit says, there are a lot of Israelis who completely agree with you. But there are some who say, look, it's terrible for the families, but the war has to continue until, every last Hamas fighter is gone and there's no threat there anymore. And if that means great pain for some families, well, it means the safety of the country. That's their argument. I'm not saying that's my argument, but that's what they say. What do you say to those Israelis who feel that way?
Listen, it's an opinion. I think it's really extreme opinion. This is not what the country wants. They can say whatever, but I think the majority, they want the deal. They want to release the hostages. They feel this is the victory for Israel to bring them home. And this is the whole victory for the whole terrible 425 days that we are suffering every day, fighting to bring our loved ones.
Yael, tell us a little bit about Edan. Tell us why a kid, who grew up in Tenafly, New Jersey, decides that he wants to, enlist. He wants to be a combat soldier. Tell us about him.
Edan is I'm saying in Hebrew, it's like neshama tova. He's such a good soul. He's the brother that hugs you till it's painful, but he loves you so much. And he was in such a great relationship with Mika, my daughter. They were having this late drive and speaking about all the stuff in high school. And as a son, he was so he's really into family stuff. And it's not so common when you're 18, 19, you want to spend all the time with the family. And this is something that we are really cherish, all the family vacation, all we are going to the city, to New York City to spend the time together. And He's just such a full of life. It's like he came from a big group of friends, and all senior year they were like partying together and doing all the trips together. And he's such a good friend. He's I don't know. And when he told us senior year that he wants to last aliyah, to make aliyah and to come to Israel and to enter kibbutz, I was like looking at him and I'm like, really? You sure? Why not college? Why not to do a trip? Something else? And he said, no, this is the right thing to do. I want to come and protect Israel. He loves Israel so much. And he thought this is the right thing to do for him before college. And we supported it, me and Adi. We were like, okay, fine, Edan, whatever you like.
Because how old was he when you left Israel?
It was 2 months, 2.5 months. He was a baby when we left Israel. It was 2004. We moved to Maryland. We spent like 4 years in Maryland, and then we moved to Jersey. He's all American dude, but still, love Israel. Israel, it's like our happy place. Like every vacation, we are traveling to Israel. No Thailand, nothing. Like we are coming to the family to spend time together, to explore the country. Like this is come from home, That's why his Hebrew is so good also, by the way. You could hear him on the video that he's speaking so well. And I was so proud, to hear him speaking.
So he's in that small group that are both Israeli and American citizens, and therefore the American government is, has a stake in this. And I know that on the anniversary of October the 7th, you were in New York, and there was a ceremony partly marking the anniversary, and you met there Donald Trump, who is now obviously the president-elect. He said recently that there will be hell to pay if the hostages aren't released. There's obviously been big efforts by the American government until now. What do you think he might be able to do that has not happened in the last 14 months for your son and for the other hostages?
I believe President Trump, when he met us on October 7, it was a private meeting, just us, Trump, me, Adi, and Roy, my little one, he came with us. It was a private meeting. He was really eager to hear about Edan. It was really interesting to hear that he's alive. And just told me that they need to come back home. There is urgency, and it's something that's supposed to be now. But he didn't say anything about Biden administration. He didn't spoke like, in my watch, it never happened, and ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta. No, he was really respectful, and I got from this conversation that this is something that he's going to do whatever he can to make it happen. And with the tweet, I believe that Trump basically saying to everyone, listen, I don't like wars. Finish with it before I'm coming to office. And I'm not sure everyone knows it about Trump, but Trump don't want wars. He just want everyone to be like, he want peace and quiet, he want good economy, like he wants to handle stuff in the US. So I think he was like threatening everyone, maybe to make a say, here, I'm the elected president, and you need to start moving. Don't wait for me.
Yeah. So you think it was a message for both sides?
It was a message for everyone, I think. Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
Are you more optimistic now than you were a few months ago?
Optimistic, it's a strong word. I'm trying not, I'm not using it. Like, I'm hopeful. Like, hope is mandatory. Like, you have to be hopeful and to stay like with faith that it's gonna end. And Edan is coming home, and all the hostages will release soon. But I don't know. Maybe I don't know.
There's obviously a real bond or something in common that you share with the other families. And one of those families we know got very sad news this week, and I think you were speaking to them. Can you tell us about that?
So we 2 days after we got the sign of life of Edan, Orna and Ronen Nautra got the most terrible message that their son murdered on October 7th. I'm still shocked that this would happen, because we are in this fight, shoulder to shoulder, doing all this trip, doing all this meeting, all this media, and they were like such a great and loving parents. They were like all over the US, like crazy, working nonstop. And suddenly they're giving them this message after 243 days. I was devastated. My husband over there went yesterday to the memorial service that they throw to Omer. It was in Long Island. It was very difficult. I know Edan and Omer were friends. They were kidnapped from the same post on October 7, and I felt the need just to come and speak about Omer, to tell people about Omer. Like, I felt that I know Omer because I knew so well his parents and all the stories and what he liked and how he's been, and I saw so many pictures, and videos, and I know his brother and all the family in Israel. They're like a great family. We are feeling family, and it's devastating what they're going through now these days.
It's probably not easy to have this battle from afar. I mean, most of the families of the hostages are here in Israel. You have to, most of the time, to see it from afar. I assume that isn't very easy for you either.
It's not easy, but you know what? We are working nonstop over there in the US because we are Americans. And our work is not just for the Americans, it's for all the hostages. So when we are there in meetings, we are talking about everyone. And sometimes we see the delegation from Israel, sometimes not, but we are there and we are working like in full, and we are not going to stop and till they all come back.
People who are listening to this interview and can't see it can see that you are wearing the sticker saying 425 days. That's how long it's been. I know our listeners are thinking of Edan, your son, and of all the hostages. Yael Alexander, thanks so much for talking to us for Unholy.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
It is 426 days. I don't think any of us can imagine what these people are going through. Just the terrible worry. And I couldn't not think of, while hearing her, and, I hope so deeply and desperately that it ends differently. But I thought of the conversation that we brought on this podcast, the conversation I did with Rachel Goldberg and John about Hirsch, and kind of another diaspora story, right? A bridge between Israel and diaspora. They made Aliyah 17 years ago, and Hirsch, of course, did his military service, and this happened to him. He was abducted while at the Nova party, and you think of these parents and what they go through. I mean, just think how many types of hell they have gone through in the past 14 months. And to see your son like that, first of all, for the first time to see him and, feel that relief. And on the other end of that is just to want him close by. And it's just, it's terrible. I'm glad that we got to hear her perspective because it's so important for as many people as possible. But it's just, it's heartbreaking and it's gut wrenching.
It is. And I had that same memory, actually, partly because of the sticker she wore with the number of days, and we were both very struck by that when we first spoke to Rachel Goldberg-Polin, and there it is, the same sticker, and the number is so high. I mean, 420 something. I mean, this is just going on and on and on. When we spoke to her, she was between appointments, running from one place to another, just again, like Rachel Goldberg-Polin, these other parents, this is all they're doing, morning, noon and night, desperate to get the word out and to make sure that these their sons and daughters, their people, are not forgotten, and that the issue isn't forgotten. I think actually that may lead us into the first of our award winners in a way. We're going to come on to a very crowded field for one of our awards, but why don't you kick us off with our Mensch nominee?
Yeah, I mean, we were talking a lot about the fact that Israel does not have an official commission of inquiry for the terrible failure of October 7th, which is really incredible. It's clear that Netanyahu himself does not want that inquiry because it might implicate him, or rather it surely will implicate him. And what happened in the meantime, instead of that, is that many parents who have lost their loved ones on October 7th, essentially set up a civilian probe into October 7th. And they, for months, would listen to testimonies of, the politicians who would talk to them, the soldiers who could talk to them. And this went on for a long time. One of the people who sat on, this was a serious, investigation. One of the people who sat on the committee is Rafi Ben Shitrit. He was from the Likud. He was the former mayor of Bet She'an. His son it was a soldier. He died on October 7th. And he keeps saying, and of course it comes from someone from the right that carries its own weight. He kept saying it is impossible to fathom that there is no official commission of inquiry. He even came on Channel 14 and kind of reprimanded them for, Channel 14 being the mouthpiece for Netanyahu, reprimanding them for not standing up for this idea. So we're giving this, I think, mention word to this civilian probe, the civilians who have set up this commission, this unofficial commission, and they their report was published this week. It won't surprise you that obviously the most important conclusion is that both the government and the military failed terribly on October 7th. But again, it is a serious sort of read to go through what they heard and what they, brought forth after these couple of months.
Yeah, very, very important. But as you say, a function of the failure of other bodies to have done this inquiry. Long ago, it should have been started long ago and should have been official. But yes, a worthy winner. I don't mind admitting that our first, bulging field for chutzpah, but this first one, it sort of enraged me, this story. And I don't mind admitting that. It centers on the diaspora affairs minister in the Israeli government, Amichai Shikli, who had a phone call with this man who's emerged pretty much out of nowhere to become a front-running candidate for the presidency of Romania. His name's Călin Georgescu. He's from the far right in that country, big sympathizer with Vladimir Putin and Russia, ultra-nationalist. But crucially for our purposes, he is somebody with a record of praising those who in the 1940s were on the side of Nazism, namely the anti-Semitic Iron Guard and the dictator of Romania in that period, Ion Antonescu, who collaborated with Nazi Germany. The Iron Guard is notorious for its involvement in a whole lot of acts of violence against Romanian Jews, including the 1941 pogrom in Bucharest, which murdered more than 100 Jews. Georgescu has praised those people, described them as heroes and martyrs, even though Jewish groups in Romania opposed that and said, please don't do that. He carried on doing it. And then he gets this clean bill of health, a sort of, crypto endorsement from Amichai Shikli, a minister in the Israeli government. It falls to not an Israeli official, but Romania's ambassador to Israel, in other words, a Romanian diplomat, to say that this is hugely damaging. It turns out that the Romanian ambassador to Israel is himself a historian of the Holocaust, and he has condemned this intervention as outrageous because this was involved praise in people involved in pogroms and mass murder of Romanian Jews. In other words, the government of Romania is defending Romanian Jews. The diaspora affairs minister of the Israeli government, somebody you would expect to have the back of a small diaspora Jewish community, does not. It is, I think, just disgraceful, and a reminder that there are some pretty disgraceful characters who are in the current Israeli government, and a chutzpah award with knobs on goes to Amichai Shikli for lending a hand to someone who has praised the enemies and murderers of the Jewish people. It's outrageous. You may notice that I am pretty enraged by this. My usual cool-headed detachment and objectivity has departed from me on this story. It's just appalling.
So first of all, my Romanian mother, who immigrated to Israel at the age of 16, is very glad we're finally talking about Romania on the podcast in the Jewish community, although she probably want it in a different perspective. But anyway, we're glad about that. Look, this is a page in a way out of Netanyahu's playbook, right? I mean, that kind of cozying up to right-wing or extreme right-wing representatives in Europe. In the Talmud, they say, this one benefits and the other doesn't lose. Actually, in this case, they both benefit, because what happens is the right-wing, far right-wing representative in Europe gets the kosher stamp from the Israeli government. And the Israeli government gets to say, oh, look, we have such great support around Europe. So that is, again, this is a Netanyahu's playbook. Of course, Netanyahu does it a bit more elegantly than Amichai Shikli. We should remind our listeners that Shikli himself also said a while back, I think it was June of 2023, that J Street is hostile to Zionism and that J Street is the enemy organization funded by George Soros. So you get where this person is coming from. It's always very interesting to me to think about Naftali Bennett as someone who, on the one hand, would appoint someone as, sober and talented as Shimrit Meir. Listeners of this podcast have heard her more than once as a diplomatic advisor. On the other hand, nominate or bring Amichai Shikli into Israeli politics and make him a member of Knesset. We'll remind our listeners that he is one of the people who broke up the Bennett government to join Netanyahu, and he received the gift of the role of being a minister, in this case, Minister of, as you say, Diaspora Affairs. So a worthy winner, I think, of the Chutzpah Award of this week. I would add, if we can, we said it's a bit of an expanded chutzpah category this week. I think this week cannot pass without us mentioning President Biden and his pardon of his son, Hunter. I get that there are points in life where being the patriarch of your family can run or head to head with being the president of a country, but that is why you're the president of the country and you need to choose the good of the country. And the fact that I think what the most problematic thing about this is not only that he said numerous times that he won't pardon Hunter, and obviously he lied, but what it does is erode really the sort of trust that people have in institutions, because the danger of this is saying, well, everyone's corrupt. Everyone does it. So what if Trump does it? Biden does it too. And I think that is the biggest danger in this. You can rationalize it, till you're short of breath. But the point is that if the result of that is that people are going to say, democracy is just corrupt and everyone does this, I think that's very dangerous, and not only for the United States.
I agree. And I had huge disappointment at this decision by Joe Biden. But I think it does make the point you're going to, which is that corruption has that kind of corrosive, contagious effect because it becomes rational to become corrupt. So I don't think it's irrational for Joe Biden to fear that Hunter Biden was going to become a target of Donald Trump's Justice Department. They would have come after him, which would be a corrupt thing for Trump's future Justice Department to do. Therefore, to guard against that corruption, you yourself have to then do something corrupt, which is to pardon preemptively your own son. And that's how it works. Once, as you say, people are bribing people, then the only thing you can do is also bribe people. It's a contagion. And it tells you that societies that are not corrupt, they're held together by this very thin, so the strings are very thin that sort of hold society together, and it doesn't take much for them to fray and break. And we may be witnessing that in America. Very, very soon it may become just the way you have to operate in order to do business. And it can, we've seen other societies where that happens. There's no magic sort of immunity that countries like the United States have. They could go down that road. While we're in the zone of American presidents acting in dodgy ways, can we please mention Donald Trump's nomination of his other machaton? Namely, this has been quite a crop. He's appointed another father-in-law to one of his children, namely Charles Kushner, father of Jared Kushner, father-in-law to Ivanka Trump, to be the United States ambassador to Paris. Significance of that is that Charles Kushner served jail time for a whole, series of things that involved just the most lurid story. Chris Christie was governor of New Jersey, was the prosecutor in that case, and said it was one of the grossest, most heinous crimes he'd seen in New Jersey, adding, and in New Jersey, you see a hell of a lot, right? This involved The story was so lurid, it involved Charles Kushner hiring a prostitute to seduce his brother-in-law, then sending the video of that to his own sister to intimidate her out of testifying against him, Charles Kushner. I mean, low life does not even capture it. He's now America's ambassador to France. It's a sign of how low Trump is ready to sink. And indeed, I think of American public life itself took a real bruising this week at the hands of both Biden and Trump.
And we apologize because this is a family-friendly podcast, and Jonathan said some words he shouldn't have said, but this is the reality of what he was indicted for. So we just had to tell the story and, say the facts.
We did. So we end where we began with a little reminder that this is a big week for us on Unholy, because we are now offering membership to you to be part of what we're doing here. You can be a friend of the pod. You can be a family member. All the details are in the show notes, also at patreon.com/unholypod. We would really love it if you were to become part of what we're doing here. There's lots in it for you in terms of bonus episodes and all that, but it would be great for us as well. So patreon.com/unholypod is the place to go for all of that.
And we will say our thank yous to Michal Porat and Gili Remen, and we shall meet next week.
See you then.